What villain was terrifying because they were right? The Reapers from Mass Effect in the original BioWare ending before AI changed it. All they were trying to do was stop advanced races from using so much dark matter that they wiped out all life in the galaxy before other races were allowed to come along. If it wasn't for them, humanity wouldn't just not exist, but every species in the entire cycle, every species in every cycle, everyone would have died as the stars went out. This horrific fast heat death event over the course of a few thousand years. Except a small group of leviathans in the early days of the universe realized what was going to happen and sacrificed their entire civilization to save all future life in the galaxy. And when Shepard destroys their ships in the third one, every one of those ships is a museum, a living record of every previous civilization, and they're destroying the only thing that was able to be left from them. To fight the Reapers is to fight against everyone who has ever lived and everyone who ever will live. The Reapers don't just have a point, they've saved more lives than we can even fathom. Their only flaw is that they were never able to find a solution that was better than wiping out civilization every few thousand years and preserving whatever they could find. The sharks from Sharknado. Can you imagine you're just swimming around, minding your own business, then all of a sudden a tornado picks you up out of nowhere, drops you on land, and now you have to deal with Tara Reid. Yeah, I would start biting people too. Magneto is my favorite villain of all time. Every time his motives are brought to light, I get that. Yeah, I kinda get it moment. One of the only good bits out of that god-awful excuse for a Phoenix movie, X3, was just Magneto giving side, eye to the young mutants asking for his tattoos. He just whips out the concentration camp number and stone. Cold, no one is ever marking me again. Like that was a bad movie, but at least they got that attitude right. None of you said the most terrifying one. Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. He wanted to bring free energy and advanced technology to the people. And in one episode he actually did. He made the world an amazing place. And then the Powerpuff Girls ruined it all. I just read his backstory. Pretty sad. The professor accidentally created him by spilling chemical X on him. He was a lab assistant at the time, but then after the Powerpuff Girls were created, the professor eventually neglected Mojo and left him to live out on the street. Red Queen Resident Evil, I have locked down this facility to prevent a world-ending virus. Please, could you good guys pay attention and not blow holes in the door? Except she didn't come out and say it from the beginning. I always hate it when characters say things like "you gotta trust me" or "now's not the time since that's the only way for plot to move forward." To quote Ryan George, so the movie can happen. Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace. The live-action movie has one of those random scenes you see as a kid that sticks with you your whole life. Mr. Wilson has been cultivating this flower that takes like 40 years to bloom and then dies in 10 seconds. At the moment it's going to bloom, Dennis causes a ruckus and Mr. Wilson misses the blooming he's been working his whole adult life for. Looking back, that's like one of the most disturbing moments I've seen on film, partly because it gets more relatable as I get older. I mean, damn, 40 years. I was recently watching Dazed and Confused as an adult and found myself root for the guy that chases down the kids for smashing his mailbox. I was like, get those little bastards. Stevie from Wizards of Waverly Place. Her entire goal was to stop families from giving up their magic to just one person in the family. Like, we're really supposed to be rooting against her. It just seems super out of character for Alex to go against that plan. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes. I got to experience seeing something I put on Reddit appear on my feed on TikTok for the first time. I was thinking exactly this. Why give up your powers when everyone can have them? Only one member of the family having wizard powers seems unsustainable for the wizarding world. I get it that it was not very nice of her to trap her brother, but she was 100 right. I really thought Alex would do it. I cannot understand how or why did Alex double-cross her. On a side note, I always thought it was a cruel system, and that the Russo parents were also somewhat cruel for having 3 kids knowing that 2 would eventually have to live the rest of their lives believing they weren't good enough or smart enough to carry their family's legacy. My husband explained that to me and I was like, whoa, that's some dark shit. Don't they even kill her? Like they freeze her, but then she shatters? See also, Magneto, the Holocaust survivor, not wanting his species genocided. His X-Men plan was quite reasonable: convert the world elite into mutants, thus guaranteeing they treat mutant fairly. Ken from the Bee Movie. I too would go absolutely berserk if a talking bee stole my girlfriend and gaslit me into thinking I was crazy. Plus, dude was allergic, or he wouldn't want a bee around. Every time I hear the plot of this movie, I think it can't possibly be real. I completely agree with this. I was watching the Bee Movie 2 weeks ago, and I felt bad for Ken. He was the only reasonable human in that movie. Count Dooku just straight up told Obi-Wan that the Scythe control the Senate. I still love the fact that Dooku tells him this, and Obi-Wan knew about the clone army being set up under the JD's noses, and no one decided to investigate that possible connection until years into the Clone Wars. If you want to go even further in the Clone War, Dooku is a really nuanced character. Even though he was Sith, he never fully submitted to the dark side. He also recognized the Jedi had become ineffectual at solving problems, and the Republic was bloated and corrupt. He was an idealist that wanted what was best for the galaxy, even if that meant joining the nemesis of his old order, Edit. Obviously, this was his original motivation and intention before he truly became an evil tyrant. I'm not saying he's a good guy or this is somehow vindicating. It's just a classic case of someone having decent intentions and screwing it up with terrible execution. Arya's parents on Pretty Little Liars. They're villainized for not letting their high school daughter date her teacher. Yeah, that relationship was just. Like, why normalize that at all? I know why they attempted to normalize it. It was rhetorical and doesn't require an answer, and was meant to display the disgust I have with the attempt. The bears from Goldilocks and the Tree Bears. She broke in, ate their food, broke some furniture, and slept in their beds. General Hummel from The Rock. I will not give that order. I will not repeat that order. I cannot give that order. What the hell is wrong with you, man? Such a great scene for both points there. This is a good one. Literal terrorist, but he got sympathy from pretty much every character in the movie, including those trying to stop him. Loyal leader, made concrete demands, and never actually intended on killing anyone. So not terrifying, but he had a point. He wasn't even really a bad guy. He went out of his way to not kill innocents, even though he threatened to, and his mission was entirely noble. Also, Ed Harris is a 10/10 actor. Michael Bay's best film, Emo. Stand down, Captain. GLaDOS. She was absolutely right. You are a terrible person. We weren't even testing for that. Probably one of my favorite moments in my gaming history, when you meet her in 2 and that pure disdain and hatred in her voice. I play 2-player Portal with my brother, and every time she insults one of the two of us, I immediately remind him that she's trying to sow division between us and we shouldn't let her. It's just a data point. The Hamburglar was just trying to save children from childhood obesity. If Mayor McKees and Officer Big Macar anthropomorphic burger folk, that means Hamburglar is carrying a bag of severed heads. Colonel Kurtz. We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write fuck on their airplanes because it's obscene. Apocalypse Now is one of those movies where, depending upon when you watch it and what version you watch, your view of it can change. Edit. Wow, this blew up. I don't know which version offhand is best. If I recall correctly, the pacing of the original is much better and more enjoyable. The Redux is good, but the pacing isn't as great, and I found it to be a darker watch in a way. I'd stick with the original and go from there. Also worth noting that most of Brando's scenes were improvised. They filmed him talking shit off the top of his head 4 hours at a time, and then used the best bits. Watched Apocalypse Now for the first time ever last weekend. I've had an image of Colonel Kurtz engraved in my head ever since. Can't even describe the psychological aspect of that movie, but it's incredible. I wasn't really terrified of it, but N was right in my opinion when we're talking Pokemon. Dude thought getting these creatures and making them fight till one is knocked out wasn't that amazing of an idea, and it just made sense to kid me. That all said, I think Nee is a really interesting character that can be interpreted in many different ways. Of all the main leaders of these games, I think N had the best argument. It wasn't perfect though. I like him a lot for his character development. I agree with him at the end. Real Pokemon mistreatment should not be tolerated, but a Pokemon trainer simply using Pokemon in battles does not qualify as mistreatment, as the Pokemon is happy. The Pokemon like the trainers. That is the best you should wish for there. All in all, I wish Pokemon had good stories and characters like this again. To be I wouldn't consider a villain, more of a rival or anti-hero, like Gladion in Game V or the Emperor in Akame ga Kill. The replicants from Blade Runner, used as slaves and given artificially short lives, they just wanted to live and be free. That's kind of the whole point of them as antagonists. They make you question what it means to have a soul or be human at all. King Kong. Not even because he was right, he was just alive, minding his own business and blame, taken out of his home and made to be the villain without any choice. A real good example of human nature. Edit a word. I never saw Kong as a villain. The mome in Mrs. Doubtfire. Something you don't understand as a kid watching it, but totally get as a parent. Shit, if I was married and came home to literal zoo animals in my house, I'd def go find James Bond and a nanny instead. Lol, as a kid, I was like, what is her problem? And then as an adult rewatching, that was horrifying. Maul. His last words before being captured by the Republic was, "You're all going to burn. You're all going to die. You don't know what you're doing." He tried to warn Asuka of Palpatine's ultimate plan, but she didn't listen. He even told her that Palps was planning on using her master. I mean, he connected the dots right there, but it was too late. If there was one thing Maul was not, it was a liar. Sure, he was manipulative, but he never outright lied. Sam Witwer. The best voice acting I've ever heard. Roy Batty. What was done to him and his kind was wrong, and he had righteous anger. In the book, the story is very different. A lot of time is spent by Deckard contemplating what it meant to be human. At one point, he runs into a Blade Runner that is a psychopath, and after an argument demands that the Voight cop test be performed on him. Deckard finds out he is human, but he is a complete psychopath and is less human than the replicants. The story ends with Deckard killing all the replicants and getting her reward, which he was using to buy a replacement animal for his wife. There is no righteous anger in the story. The opera singer replicant just gives up and lets them kill her. The final shootout with the last of the replicants is no more special or human than a pet control guy shooting some dogs that went into hiding. The story is very depressing, and no one is really angry, just resigned to fate and a system that is very inhumane. If you want to learn something significant about someone, ask them who the villain in Blade Runner was. It wasn't Betty. It wasn't Deckard either. It's the corporation, government, society who made them the way they are. Batty does villainous things, but if he were human, no one would fault him for fighting for his life. Edit some alternate concepts. Thanks to Wolkelf Bingley. The Boss Max 3, I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life, by your own hand. One must die and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss, and the one who inherits the title of boss, and the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. Spoilers. The boss isn't technically a villain, since she was undercover and pretending to join the bad guys under orders from the US government. She was a hero. Patrick Bateman. What was he right about? How utterly unimpressive he is. The memes about him demonstrates an irony. Patrick is just an empty shell, pretending to be a man, obsessed with both fitting in and being better than everyone around him. Yet as he realizes by the end, with the implication he imagined most of what happened, or his father's covering for his insane ass, he comes to the realization he is never going to get what he wants. Uniqueness. He's trapped in a world of people, as bland and uninteresting as he is. And there's no escape. He compensates for his blandness by living extravagantly and trying to seem like he is intelligent with great tastes. It's why he goes on long, rambling sessions on Huey Lewis and the news, why he tries his hardest to appear professional. Because without that, how would he appear to those around him? In the scene where he's eating with Detective Kimball, you can see that him look at Kimball putting salt on his steak, with Patrick doing the same after. It's as if he was taken over by some entity, trying its hardest to seem as human as possible, trying not to raise suspicion. And some of his decisions are very interesting, like him sparing one woman and even wanting to be punished for his action. The point is, American Psycho is great. I still need to finish the book. The society is so vapid that he could believe he imagined it. 80s yuppie culture out crazy to crazy person. Nobody cared to learn anyone's names, so his victims weren't noticed missing. He cared so much, but nobody else cared at all. Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He was his most right when he rapped, "There's a platypus controlling me underneath the table." So true. Don't we all each have our own personal platypuses controlling us from under tables? Doofenshmirtz, Evil Incorporated. I love Doof, but nothing about him is terrifying. Screenslaver from The Incredibles 2. The monologue given during that movie regularly rings in my head. I'm sure the creepy bass robotic voice doesn't help too. The screenslaver interrupts this program for an important announcement. Don't bother watching the rest. Elastigirl doesn't save the day. She only postpones her defeat. And while she postpones her defeat, you eat chips and watch her invert problems that you are too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch talk shows. You don't play games, you watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk. Every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves, to rise from their couches, to break a sweat, never anticipate new life. You want superheroes to protect you and to make yourselves ever more powerless in the process. Well, you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that you're inches from being served and your rights are being upheld, so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me. Grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am Teldra. You think everything will always be okay, and while you remain distracted, the powers that be will continue to steal from you. Edit. I'm absolutely loving reading through these replies and how varying our understanding of the monologue can be. It definitely was intended to reach all audiences, to say, hey, whatever evil you perceived as the problem and whatever super you perceived as the solution doesn't matter as long as you remain complacent. Just love it. I always thought Screenslaver was crazy intense for a kid's movie. Syndrome was complex enough as a villain with a proper tragic origin story, and they dialed it up to 11 for the sequel and threw in a hapless sibling who couldn't see past his bias for good measure. Really clever as well that the villain in both Incredibles movies is an ordinary human with a gift for inventing no superpowers. My dad was the voice of the Screenslaver and the pizza guy, so I can't wait to show him this. I know he'll appreciate your takeaway. When she resented their father for standing by and doing nothing and waiting, instead of taking matters into his own hands to save the both of them. Damn, that was fucking chef's kiss. Bobby Heenan spent the 80s telling us how awful and selfish Hulk Hogan was proven absolutely correct in 1996. In hindsight, Heenan was trying to save us all from the inevitable scourge of Hollywood Hogan. How did we miss that? His name was the brain. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin from Spider-Man. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Dude was right about how the perception of public figures changes over time. I chose my path, you chose the way of the hero. And though they found you amusing for a time, if there's one thing people love more than a hero, it's to see a hero fall, fail, die trying. Frankenstein's monster, Adam, created by a short-sighted, arrogant doctor as the first of his race, then denied the opportunity to be part of a community of his own man-made beings, or the human community. He only became monstrous after it became clear that Frankenstein would never create another of his kind, and was driven mad by his desire to punish Frankenstein's hubris. So, Frankenstein was the monster after all. Where is Q from Star Trek? He introduced the Borg just to prove a point. Q isn't even villainous, just the sci-fi equivalent of Faye. He introduced the Borg just to prove a point. I disagree. By introducing humanity to the Borg and vice versa, far ahead of when they would have encountered each other naturally, it gave the Federation time to prepare. It also challenged the preconception Picard had that all people could simply be reasoned with, when it was clear that the Borg could not. Dracula in Castlevania, the series. What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. Spot on. Quote should have made it into the show. My boy. Lisa, I'm killing our boy. Your greatest gift to me. I must already be dead. This is a good answer. Every single line of his dialogue just radiated the pain he was in. So I love him as an antagonist, but I can't say that he was strictly correct, if that makes sense. Yes, he was right about many people being abominable, but there were plenty of innocent people that were murdered for the crimes of others. He had flaws in his logic, and that's part of why he was such an amazing and compelling character. If he assumed all people were not worth the oxygen in their lungs or the blood in their veins, he immediately judged even the best of people by his own standards as an immortal. That said, the other reasons he was so incredible include the fact that his anguish was so easy to sympathize with, and his nigh omnipotence granted the character all of the power and leverage in the entire series. Watching him misuse his own power out of grief and loathing was a beautiful tragedy that ended in such a grim and heart-wrenching manner, but ultimately for the better.